I am now going to cut out this piece across here. This is the patterned paper that your photos go over. So generally I would like to put my photos on it before cutting it out, just to check that I like that pattern underneath my photos. The paper that I used originally is actually really clever ones from Celebrate. They have two different patterns on the one sheet. But for this layout, I've decided to just rather use a plain blue, as I think that goes really well with it and I like how my photos look on it. If you would like to at this stage, you can lay your photos onto your layout just to check that you're happy with how it's looking. Generally, when I'm positioning my photos, I actually don't like it when it looks like you're looking out of the page. So personally, I think it would be better to arrange my photos in a different order. Like that, then everything that I'm looking forward and everything else is facing inwards, which I think looks better. As you would have noticed already with the notes, it is very easy to follow and you just continually keep paging over until you've cut out the next piece. These three strips here are actually, they've come off the end. They are the barcode strips that I have used. Similar to these ones, except on this particular paper pack, it's got wording on it. So you can either see if you feel any of these are appropriate for your layout. Always look at the sayings and see if I feel like they would work on my page. Alternatively, washi tape would actually also look really nice. I've done 3 different patterns, so you could either copy exactly how I've done it and do the 3 different patterns, or it could actually look quite nice to use the same paper and just cut out the 3 different strips, which is what I think I'm actually going to do, because I do like this wood grain with it. So I'm going to cut out my 3 different strips for the 3 that go along here, and I'm just going to use the wood grain. Before cutting into a pattern like this, just bear in mind which way you would like your stripes to go, if you'd prefer vertical or you'd prefer horizontal. I generally like to put my page together as I cut it out. It just gives you a nice overview of how your page is looking, and it also makes it a little bit easier when you're choosing your different patterns to just make sure that they work well with what you've already cut out. So you can see I'm creating a little bit of a different look to what I had originally created doing this layout. That's where I find these layout notes are so nice, because you can change it and adapt them according to the photos, the papers, and the layout that you would like to create for yourself. We now need to add a strip across the top. You can actually leave it off. If I look at my pattern here, I feel like it's already quite busy and I don't think it's actually going to work to put something else over it. Unless you do something that's quite plain, like this one. But for now, where I've done that zigzag pattern, I'm actually going to leave it off this layout because I don't think it'll actually add any value to my page at all. I've chosen to use the wood grain for the piece that I've put over here on the right hand side, just because I feel like the wood grain then ties up really nicely where I've used it on the left and then where I've incorporated it onto the right. As you will see at the top here, I've got the 2 different tags sticking out. I did notice earlier on the back of this sheet, it actually had some really nice tags. If you would like, you can actually cut these out and then tuck them underneath. If you're going to tuck them underneath, you're going to cover quite a lot of the pattern. I would recommend then using a tag that you wouldn't necessarily want to have the whole tag on show, because a lot of it will be covered. I personally never use scissors to cut out elements like this. I obviously use scissors for fussy cutting, but I find for cutting out things like your tags, you get a much neater look if you cut it out with a craft knife. So there's my tag. So from a tag like that, you can create a different look. See, I've chosen to not have the whole tag on show. I've chosen to just tuck it underneath my page like that. I like the colors of this green one, so for my second tag, I'm going to cut out this green one. As you can see, our layout is coming out really nicely and coming together very quickly. I cannot actually believe how quickly my second layout has come out. First time round, I created my layout obviously from scratch, and so much time and effort goes into all the design work, trying this, trying that, seeing what works best, and it's actually really surprising how quickly my second layout, using the same template I created earlier, has actually come together. For my element here, I have actually used the same patterned paper. You'll see I've done a bigger piece of the wood grain followed by the smaller piece. When I've inked them, you'll definitely see a contrast, but if you'd prefer to see a bigger difference between the two, you can always feel free to mat the smaller piece in cardstock. Or alternatively, you could always cut out a different piece of patterned paper to put over the wood grain if you would like something to look a little bit different. I then cut out a very small piece to go over it, which color-wise I find this brown piece looks really nice, so I'm going to use this for my little piece that goes over it. The only piece of patterned paper that I still need to cut out for my layout are these strips that form my border. Something like that blue could look really pretty as the border. Due to the fact I'm cutting very narrow strips, I don't think something with a very prominent pattern would work particularly well. Alternatively, just a simple blue stripe could also work nicely. I actually like the colors that this is bringing into my layout. It ties up with the piece that I've used there, and I actually think those colors will create a really nice border. We've now cut out all the pieces of paper that we need to create our layout. When you've cut out all your sheets of paper, at this stage I actually find it's much better to rather photograph your layout. It just makes it easier once you've inked all your pieces that you know exactly how to put it together again. I generally take a photograph of my full page, but then I also like to do a close-up of the left and the right page. I just find it is way easier to put it together if you've got a picture as a reference. Generally, I always like to ink my pieces of paper. I find it gives you a more finished look, and also if you have a very dark sheet, you always see the white core coming through, which I don't think looks particularly nice. So I always like to edge my different sheets of paper. There's quite a variety of different ink pads that you can use. I've got a huge selection, just really depends on what color I would like to use on my page. If you would like to, you can always just try a little bit on an offcut before deciding if that's the color you would like to go for on your layout. That, for example, is the black shadow. I do feel like it's a little bit harsh on my layout, so I think for this particular one I'd actually prefer to go for a brown instead of the black. If you would like to, once again, you can just try it on the offcut just to check that you actually like this color. That gives a much nicer look. You'll see color-wise it blends in really nicely, where I find the black was a little bit too different and it just looked too heavy on the layout. The brown gives you a very nice edging, but without looking too bold and prominent. Then you can take your layout apart and then start inking all of your edges. Generally, I never ink the edges that are down the center. I just don't like to divide my page. So I'll ink those three edges, but I never ink down the center of it. I generally like to use the blending tool. I find it's a lot easier to ink this way. You can ink as much or as little as you like, depending on the desired effect that you would like to get on your layout. See, as you can see, I've just inked the outside three edges, so the center piece isn't inked. So as you look at your layout, those two pieces still join nicely together with just having the outside edges inked. But you can already see the contrast that you get between the two different patterns. To me, it looks a little bit unfinished if you don't ink the different edges. Alternatively, on this particular layout, I haven't matted my edges, but if you would like to, you can always get cardstock and then match your different patterned papers if you would like to have a bigger contrast between the two. Just to give you an idea, this is what it would look like if you decided to mat your papers. Often I do like to mat on my layouts, but for this particular page, I'm just going to leave it with inked edges and not worry to mat the different papers. At this stage, I actually prefer to pack away all my pieces of paper that I'm not using, because you don't want to end up inking pieces that you're not going to be using for your layout. With these tags, as some of it will be hidden underneath the pattern paper, you don't actually have to ink around all the edges. You can just go down a little way, but not worry to ink the whole tag. Just to give you an idea, look at the difference between the tag that's not inked and the tag that is inked. To me personally, I think it looks way nicer inked up against the patterned paper. Later on with these tags, I think it would look really nice to punch a hole in here and put a little bit of twine through it. But I will show you when we get to that stage. You'll notice that I'm inking all four edges of these papers. The only ones that I don't ink all four edges are the ones that will join up again in the middle, as I showed you earlier with the blue piece. Also, if you're just starting out with scrapbooking and you don't want to buy a variety of different ink pads, I always find that brown is amazing, and it goes with all your different pattern papers that you are working with, no matter what colors they are. It's obviously lovely to have a nice selection of all sorts of different colors, but you can just gradually build up your stash as and when you are able to. But if you are looking at starting out and just want to buy a few colors to begin with, generally the browns are always stunning with any papers you might be working with. we go. I've now finished inking all of my pieces of paper. It's up to you which way around you would like to do it. Generally, I prefer to put together my whole base, and at that stage then I'll mat my photos, sand them, and put them onto my layout, but it's up to you which way around you would like to do it. But for now, I'm going to tape all my pieces of paper. I generally always stand while doing my scrapbooking, but at this stage you can actually sit down if you prefer while you tape all your pieces. Generally, I just use the two different widths of double-sided tape. I've got the 6mm and then the 12mm. So for your very narrow pieces, you would then use your 6mm, and for any of your bigger pieces, the 12mm one will be perfect. I only use liquid glue when I'm sticking down my embellishments, for example, titles, flowers. When I'm using my twine, I personally don't use any glue for sticking down my photos or my patterned papers or cardstock. Just bear in mind when you are creating your layout that you need to use acid-free double-sided tape and acid-free glue. If you don't, you'll find the acid eats into your photos, and I have over the years seen quite a few ladies who have been very disappointed as the acid has then taken out the color in their photos, and you can actually see exactly where they had put the glue because it's taken all the color out of the photos and left behind a white patch, which obviously doesn't look nice. We're creating our albums to last for many future generations to have a look at, so it's no point using adhesives that are not the correct ones for scrapbooking. You don't want to put all this time and effort into your layout to find either your photos have fallen off your layout or that you've now damaged them because you've used products with acid in them. I also like all my patterned papers to lie flat on my page. So I know some people do cut the double-sided tape into smaller strips, but I personally prefer to run it the full length of my page. I just find your papers lie nice and flat then on your layout. You can, if you want to, with a very big sheet of paper like this, is put a little bit of double-sided tape across the center as well. I just find then it lies totally flat, where sometimes it can bow a little bit if you don't put double-sided tape across the center. Now I have double-sided all my pieces. I put double-sided tape on all of them. I can now start putting together my layout.